Detective Sean Riley had been with the police department for 15 years. A decorated officer, he was known for getting results at any cost. But beneath the badge and the accolades, there was a darkness inside him. Sean wasn't just tough, he was ruthless and, more than anything else, deeply prejudiced. He had a particular disdain for black people, always assuming the worst and treating them with an iron fist. Despite complaints over the years, Sean's record was clean, thanks to well-placed connections and a system that protected him. Until the day Alexis Carter walked into his life. Chapter 1: The Arrest. It was a rainy Friday night when Sean's radio crackled. Possible break-in reported at 3457 Maple Avenue. Suspect, African-American female, mid-30s, wearing a gray coat. Approach with caution. Sean smirked. Another thug caught in the act, he thought as he slammed the cruiser into gear. When he arrived at the scene, he saw her, exactly as described. She was standing on the porch of a modest suburban house, seemingly calm, with an umbrella shielding her from the downpour. "Hands up!" Sean barked, pulling his gun without hesitation. The woman blinked, startled. "Excuse me?" "I said hands up. Step away from the door." "I live here," she said calmly. "There's been a mistake." "Don't move." Sean snarled, grabbing her wrist and twisting it behind her back. He was rough, deliberately so. "You can explain it downtown." "Let me go," she said, her voice steely now. "You have no idea who I am." Sean chuckled. "Oh, I know exactly who you are. Just another." "Careful," she cut him off, her eyes narrowing. "Choose your words wisely." But Sean didn't care. He dragged her to the squad car, ignoring her protests and locking her in the back seat. Chapter 2: A Sudden Turn. The ride to the station was tense. The woman sat silently, her eyes boring into the back of Sean's head. "You'll regret this," she said finally. "Yeah? We'll see about that," Sean scoffed. When they reached the station, he hauled her inside and threw her in a holding cell. "Sit tight while I run your name." He sat at his desk, typing her information into the system. Nothing. He frowned. "What the hell?" He tried again. Still nothing. No arrest record, no ID match, nothing at all. Then his phone rang. "Detective Riley," he answered. "Detective, this is Chief Daniels," said a voice on the other end, cold and clipped. "Release the woman you just brought in. Now." Sean blinked. "Sir, I think she's involved in." "Now, detective." "That's an order." The line went dead. Chapter 3: Revelation. Confused and angry, Sean returned to the holding cell. The woman stood, arms crossed, watching him with a faint smirk. "You've got friends in high places," Sean muttered. "You have no idea," she replied. "My name is Alexis Carter. Director of Counterintelligence at the FBI." Sean's stomach dropped. "You just illegally detained and assaulted a federal officer," she continued, stepping closer. "The highest-ranking black woman in the bureau, in fact." I didn't know," Sean stammered. "That's obvious," Alexis said. "But it's too late for excuses." Sean tried to recover. "Look, it was a misunderstanding. We got a call." "There was no call," Alexis interrupted. "I was monitoring an ongoing investigation in this neighborhood. I stopped by one of our safe houses to check in. Imagine my surprise when a rogue cop decides I'm a criminal, based solely on my skin color." Sean opened his mouth, but no words came out. I could ruin you, Alexis said softly. Have you arrested? Fired? Blacklisted? Do you know how many civil rights groups would love to hear about this? Sean swallowed hard. Please. Don't do that. I've got a family. You think your family matters more than the ones you've destroyed over the years? Alexis shot back. Every false arrest. Every time you abused your power. It's over. Chapter 4, Judgment. For a long moment, there was silence. Then Alexis pulled out her phone. I'm calling Internal Affairs, she said. Sean's knees almost buckled. Wait, he pleaded. There must be something I can do. Alexis paused, her finger hovering over the screen. There's only one way out of this, she said. You're going to help me. From now on, you'll be my informant inside this department. Every dirty cop. Every illegal action. You'll report it to me. Sean hesitated. And if I refuse? Then you'll be in prison by morning, Alexis said simply. Epilogue. From that day on, Sean Riley's life changed. He became Alexis's eyes and ears inside the police force, exposing corruption at every level. It was dangerous, but he had no choice. In the end, Sean learned that the real criminals weren't always on the street, they were sometimes wearing the same uniform he did. And Alexis Carter? She kept climbing the ranks, dismantling the old system piece by piece. As for Sean, he never forgot the lesson she taught him: no one is above the law. Chapter 5, The Silent War. Months passed. Sean Riley was living a double life. By day, he was still a respected detective, the same hard-nosed cop he had always been. But by night, he was Alexis Carter's informant, secretly feeding her information on the department's darkest secrets, illegal arrests, planted evidence, and worse. The deeper he dug, the more horrifying the truth became. What he found was not just a few bad cops, it was an entire network of corruption reaching up to some of the highest levels in the department. And at the center of it all was Captain Walter Briggs, Sean's longtime mentor and the man who had once saved his life. Sean knew that if he turned on Briggs, he'd be signing his own death warrant. But Alexis didn't give him a choice. You want out of this alive, she told him one night. You bring me Briggs. His operation. Every name. Every detail. Or I'll make sure Internal Affairs tears your life apart. Sean nodded, but his stomach churned with dread. Chapter 6, Caught in the Crossfire. Sean began building his case against Briggs. It wasn't easy. Briggs was smart, careful, and paranoid. But after weeks of surveillance and late-night digging, Sean finally had enough evidence to bring him down. He arranged a secret meeting with Alexis to hand over everything he'd found. It was a cold, windy night. Sean waited in a deserted parking lot, his heart pounding. He clutched a flash drive in his hand, containing everything: bank records, wiretaps, and emails that would expose Briggs and his entire network. Right on time, Alexis said, stepping out of the shadows. I've got everything you need, Sean said, holding out the flash drive. But before Alexis could take it, headlights lit up the parking lot. A black SUV screeched to a stop, and 4 men in tactical gear jumped out, guns drawn. Drop the drive, one of them shouted. Sean froze. He knew these men, they worked for Briggs. Run! Alexis yelled, pulling her gun. The parking lot erupted in gunfire. Sean dove behind a car as bullets whizzed past his head. Alexis returned fire, taking out one of the attackers. But they were outnumbered and outgunned. Come on! Alexis shouted, grabbing Sean's arm. Together, they sprinted toward an alley, bullets ricocheting off the pavement behind them. Chapter 7, Trust Tested. They managed to escape, ducking into an abandoned warehouse. Sean was gasping for breath, his hands shaking. "They knew," he said. "They knew we'd be there. Someone tipped them off." Alexis nodded grimly. "There's a leak. Someone inside the FBI, or your department, wants to keep this buried." Sean's mind raced. Briggs has connections everywhere. If he knows we're onto him, he won't stop until we're dead. "Then we'll have to hit him first," Alexis said. "But we can't trust anyone. Not the FBI, not the police." "So, what do we do?" Sean asked. "We go rogue," Alexis said. "We take Briggs down ourselves." Chapter 8, The Counterattack. The next few days were a blur. Alexis and Sean worked in secret, gathering the last pieces of evidence and planning their next move. They knew they had to act fast. Briggs was already hunting them, and time was running out. Finally, they were ready. Alexis sent an encrypted message to a trusted contact in the Justice Department, arranging for a public press conference where they would reveal everything. The plan was simple: expose Briggs and his network in front of the media, making it impossible for him to cover it up. But they knew it wouldn't be that easy. Chapter 9, The Final Showdown. The day of the press conference arrived. Alexis and Sean stood on the steps of the courthouse, surrounded by reporters. Cameras flashed, and microphones were thrust in their faces. "Today, we are exposing a network of corruption within the police department," Alexis began, her voice steady. "For too long, these crimes have gone unpunished. That ends now." Suddenly, a shot rang out. The crowd screamed and scattered. Sean instinctively dove to the ground, drawing his gun. He scanned the crowd, his heart racing. Another shot whizzed past, narrowly missing him. "Sniper!" Alexis shouted, pulling him behind a column. Briggs had sent his men to silence them, for good. "Stay here," Alexis said. "I'll draw their fire." "Are you crazy?" Sean hissed. "You won't make it 2 steps." But Alexis was already moving, darting through the chaos. Sean watched in horror as she sprinted across the plaza, zigzagging to avoid the gunfire. Then he saw him, Briggs, standing on a nearby rooftop, rifle in hand. Sean didn't think. He raised his gun and fired. The bullet struck Briggs in the shoulder, sending him sprawling. His rifle clattered to the ground. Epilogue: New Beginnings. Briggs was arrested that day, along with dozens of others. The scandal rocked the city, and the police department was forced to undergo a massive overhaul. As for Sean, his life would never be the same. He had been part of the problem, but now he was part of the solution. It wasn't redemption. He knew he'd never fully make up for what he'd done, but it was a start. "You did good today," Alexis told him as they watched the news coverage that night. "I had a good teacher," Sean replied. Alexis smiled. "Don't get too comfortable. There's still work to do." And with that, they got back to work, 2 unlikely allies in a fight that was far from over. Chapter 10, Shadows of the Past. Months had passed since the arrest of Captain Briggs. On the surface, everything seemed to have returned to normal. The scandal had shaken the police department, and sweeping reforms were underway. But for Sean and Alexis, the fight was far from over. Every day, new reports landed on Alexis's desk, anonymous tips about suspicious disappearances, falsified records, and disturbing ties between the police and organized crime. "This isn't over," Alexis said one late night in her office. Her fingers tapped on a thick folder filled with fresh names and reports. Briggs wasn't the mastermind. There's someone higher up, someone more dangerous. Sean nodded, his unease growing. He had suspected it for a while. Something about how easily Briggs had been taken down felt wrong, like it had been a distraction from the real threat. He was about to find out just how right he was. Chapter 11, An Unexpected Warning. One night, while driving home, Sean noticed a black SUV following him too closely. His pulse quickened. He made a quick turn down a deserted street, speeding up to shake the tail. The SUV followed. Sean pulled into a dark alley, cut the engine, and stepped out with his gun drawn. The SUV skidded to a stop behind him, and a man in a black suit got out with his hands raised. "Relax, Detective Riley," the man said calmly. "I'm here to help." "Help? You've been following me." Sean kept his gun steady. "Start talking, or you'll need more than good intentions to walk out of here." The man glanced over his shoulder, his face tense. "You don't understand. They're coming for you, and for Director Carter." Briggs was just the beginning. "There's another player, far more powerful, and they've already marked you both for elimination." Sean's grip on the gun tightened. "Who are you?" "Someone who wants to live long enough to tell you the truth," the man said. "Find Victor Marshall. He knows everything. And trust no one, especially not the people closest to you." Chapter 12, Hunted. The next morning, Sean shared everything with Alexis. "Victor Marshall," she repeated, scrolling through her database. "Former CIA operative. Went off the grid 5 years ago after investigating international crime syndicates. And now he's back?" Sean asked. "Looks like it," Alexis replied. "If he knows who's behind this, we need to find him. But something tells me he won't be easy to track down." Their only lead was an old warehouse on the outskirts of the city, a place Victor was rumored to have used as a safe house. Chapter 13, The Trap. That night, Sean and Alexis approached the warehouse. The place was dark and eerily quiet. Inside, everything was covered in dust, old crates, broken furniture, and shattered windows. "You think he's still here?" Sean whispered, scanning the shadows. "Let's hope so," Alexis said, her hand resting on her holstered gun. Suddenly, a floorboard creaked behind them. "You've been looking for me," a low voice said from the darkness. A tall man with gray hair and a weathered face stepped into the light. It was Victor Marshall. "If you've come for answers, be ready for a truth that won't sit well with you," Victor said, his eyes locked on theirs. "We're ready," Alexis replied. Victor walked closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. "The people behind this aren't just dirty cops. They're an international network, one that trades in power, money, and lives. They've infiltrated law enforcement, the FBI, even the government. And now, they're coming for you." Chapter 14, Betrayal. Before Victor could say more, a gunshot rang out. Sean dove to the ground, pulling his weapon. "Get down!" Victor staggered back, clutching his chest. He collapsed to the floor, blood spreading across his shirt. "Ambush!" Alexis shouted. Armed men in black tactical gear burst through the windows, guns blazing. "Run!" Alexis grabbed Sean's arm, dragging him toward the back exit. Chapter 15, On the Run. They barely escaped, darting down dark alleys as bullets whizzed past. Their breaths came in ragged gasps, adrenaline pumping through their veins. "We can't trust anyone," Sean panted, leaning against a wall. They took out Victor, and we're next. Alexis wiped the sweat from her brow, her eyes fierce. We'll find out who's behind this. But now it's war. And I plan on winning. Chapter 16, The Game Turns Deadly. Sean and Alexis knew they couldn't stay in the city. Every contact they once trusted was a potential threat, and whoever was behind the ambush would stop at nothing to silence them. We need to disappear, Alexis said, pacing in their temporary hideout, a run-down motel on the city's outskirts. Go dark until we figure out our next move. Sean frowned, glancing at the cracked motel window. Disappearing won't solve this. They'll keep hunting us until we hit back harder. We need to strike first. Alexis smirked, her eyes gleaming with determination. Then we take this fight to them. Chapter 17, The Shadow Organization. With no access to official FBI resources, Alexis and Sean relied on every favor and back-channel connection they had. It wasn't long before they found their first clue, a hidden offshore account linked to multiple bribes and payouts. The account led them to a high-level banker in Zurich, a man named Armin Voss. He wasn't just a financier, he was the money launderer for the entire Shadow network. We get to Voss, we get everything, Alexis said, pulling up a flight schedule. But it's not going to be easy. His security is tight, and he's paranoid. Sean chuckled dryly. I'll take paranoid over bulletproof any day. Chapter 18, The Zurich Heist. In Zurich, the city glowed with cold, efficient beauty, modern skyscrapers and ancient streets coexisting under the watchful eyes of private security forces. Alexis and Sean posed as potential clients looking to launder a large sum of money. They made contact with Voss at an exclusive club where the city's elite mingled under dim, flickering chandeliers. You're new here, Voss said, studying them with sharp, calculating eyes. Alexis smiled coolly, leaning in closer. We prefer to stay off the radar. For a moment, Voss seemed convinced. But then his expression darkened. You're not who you say you are, he said, signaling to a nearby guard. Sean acted fast. He grabbed Voss by the collar and shoved him against the wall, pressing a hidden recorder into his face. You're going to tell us everything, Sean growled, or I'll make sure the next headline in the Times is about your cozy relationship with international criminals. The guards advanced, but Alexis held up a flash drive. Unless you want us to release all your account records to the press, I suggest you cooperate. Voss hesitated, then nodded slowly. All right. I'll tell you what you want to know. But if you're going after them, you'll need more than threats. You'll need an army. Chapter 19, Names in the Dark. Back in their motel room, Voss's information proved more explosive than they expected. The network was called the Dominion, a clandestine organization that had been operating for decades. Their influence spread across continents, controlling law enforcement, politics, and finance. The most shocking revelation was the list of names Voss provided. At the top of the list was someone Sean knew well. Someone he trusted. Deputy Chief Ethan Moore. Sean's stomach twisted. No, that can't be right. Ethan Moore, Alexis repeated, her eyes narrowing. The same man who mentored you in the force. He's been part of this all along. Sean's mind reeled. Ethan had been like a father to him, guiding him through the hardest years of his career. The idea that he was part of the Dominion seemed impossible. Are you sure this is real? Sean asked, his voice shaking. Alexis nodded grimly. It's real. And if we don't move fast, he'll know we're onto him. Chapter 20, Betrayal Confirmed. The next day, Sean decided to confront Ethan in person. He walked into Ethan's office at the department, trying to appear calm despite the storm raging inside him. "Ethan," Sean said, closing the door behind him. "We need to talk." Ethan looked up, his face calm and unreadable. "Sean. What's going on?" Sean placed the list of names on the desk. "I know everything." For a moment, Ethan said nothing. Then, a slow smile spread across his face. "You always were a smart one," Ethan said, leaning back in his chair. "I was wondering how long it would take you to figure it out." Sean's blood ran cold. "So it's true." "It's bigger than you can imagine," Ethan said. "You think you can take this down? You'll be dead before you make it out of this building." Sean gritted his teeth. "We'll see about that." Ethan leaned forward. "I like you, Sean. I always have. That's why I'm giving you a chance. Walk away. Forget you ever saw that list. You'll have your life back. Your job. Everything." Sean shook his head. "I've made too many mistakes already. I'm not walking away this time." Ethan sighed. "Then you've made your choice." Chapter 21, The Escape. Sean barely made it out of the building alive. Ethan's men were waiting for him, but years of street-honed instincts kept him one step ahead. He slipped out through a service exit and ran, heart pounding, until he reached the car where Alexis was waiting. "Go!" Sean shouted, slamming the door behind him. Alexis floored the gas, tires screeching as they sped away. "Well?" she asked, glancing at him. "What happened?" "It's worse than we thought," Sean said, breathless. "Ethan knows everything. He tried to recruit me, or kill me. Either way, he's fully in control of the Dominion's operations here." "Then we hit him next," Alexis said, her jaw set. Sean nodded, adrenaline still surging through him. "It's time to take the Dominion down, once and for all." Chapter 22, A Plan for Revenge. Back at their hideout, Sean and Alexis knew they had to move fast. Ethan Moore had all the resources of the Dominion at his disposal. Their only chance was to expose him publicly and cripple the organization in one blow. Alexis laid out the plan. Infiltrate Ethan's private estate, where he kept physical evidence of the Dominion's operations, encrypted files on hard drives and detailed lists of collaborators. Broadcast the evidence live, using a hidden connection to the FBI's internal communication network, making it impossible to cover up. "If we succeed, we bring the Dominion down for good," Alexis said, her eyes burning with determination. "If we fail, we won't live long enough to regret it." Sean smirked. "No pressure, then." Chapter 23, Infiltration. The estate was a fortress, a sprawling mansion surrounded by high walls and patrolled by armed guards. Dressed in black and armed with fake security credentials, Sean and Alexis managed to slip past the outer defenses. They entered through a side door, carefully avoiding security cameras. Inside, the tension was suffocating. Every creak of the floorboards felt like a gunshot. "We're close," Alexis whispered, tapping into the estate's security system to disable alarms. "The server room is down that hall." But just as they reached the door, a familiar voice echoed from behind them. "Going somewhere?" Ethan stood at the end of the hallway, flanked by two armed guards. His expression was calm, almost amused. "You really thought you could walk into my house and take me down?" Ethan said, shaking his head. "I'm disappointed, Sean. I gave you a chance. You should have taken it." Chapter 24, Fight or Die. Without hesitation, Sean drew his gun and fired, forcing Ethan and his guards to dive for cover. "Run!" Alexis shouted, dragging Sean into the server room. She locked the door behind them and frantically started uploading the encrypted files to the FBI network. "They'll break through in less than a minute," Sean warned, holding the door shut as the guards pounded on it. "I just need 30 more seconds," Alexis said, her fingers flying across the keyboard. The pounding grew louder. The door began to crack under the force of the guard's battering ram. "Got it!" Alexis yelled. "The files are live." Sean grabbed her hand. "Time to go." They burst out through a side exit, sprinting across the estate as alarms blared. Bullets whizzed past them, but they didn't stop until they reached their getaway car. As they sped away, Alexis pulled out her phone and checked the FBI's live feed. "It's working," she said breathlessly. "The files are being broadcast everywhere. Every agent in the Bureau is seeing this right now." Chapter 25, The Fall of the Dominion. By the time they reached a safe location, the fallout had already begun. News stations were reporting on the scandal in real time. Ethan Moore's face was plastered across every screen, along with damning evidence of his involvement with the Dominion. Federal agents stormed his estate within the hour, arresting him and dozens of high-ranking officials connected to the network. For the first time in weeks, Sean and Alexis allowed themselves to breathe. "It's over," Sean said, slumping onto a chair. "We did it." Alexis smiled, though there was a hint of sadness in her eyes. "We took down the Dominion, but it cost us everything." Sean nodded. "Yeah. But it was worth it." Epilogue, A New Beginning. Several months later, Sean and Alexis sat at a quiet cafe in a different city. Their lives had changed dramatically. Alexis had stepped down as FBI director, preferring a quieter life away from the chaos. Sean had left the police force for good. But their bond remained unbreakable. "What's next for us?" Sean asked, sipping his coffee. Alexis leaned back, a mischievous glint in her eye. "I hear Europe's nice this time of year. Maybe we take a little trip, no conspiracies, no shootouts, just a normal life for once." Sean laughed. "I'll believe it when I see it." As they clinked their coffee cups together, neither of them noticed the man in the corner watching them closely, a phone pressed to his ear. "Yeah," the man whispered. "I found them."